All right, so pro day week has concluded. We had Bryce Young's pro day. We had CJ Stroud's pro day. We had Will Levis's pro day. And the speculation has increased around here. We're heading towards draft month. It is another edition of the Locker Room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker, and joining me now, a man who was at Bryce Young's pro day, Brooks Kubena, Houston Chronicle. Brooks, was it as magical as it looked on TV? Steve Smith was mesmerized. Was it as magical as us people thought it was, the Bryce Young pro day?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a point of interest for everybody, obviously, right? Like, I couldn't believe how many. I don't know, I've been on the pro day circuit. I used to cover college football. I used to cover LSU, and they would have tons of people come in. But I mean, there were so many GMs, so many scouts, so many whoever coming to see Bryce Young, and so much to the point where he had to like tell him to get out of the way of his workout. So, I mean, you can't judge too deeply into pro days. I try not to. Me and Jonathan Alexander, my beat partner, he was bringing this up too. It's like they go through their script of throws, and it's designed to make them look good in front of their in front of the scouts. So like, and you know, you could. I broke down. I charted it. I have this little book here. I went through all the throws, and basically what I saw is
You have your binoculars. You've been known. You're
yeah,
a big binocular guy.
over there, binoculars behind the rope with the access. And all right, quick tangent on that. They do put us behind a rope. We go into the indoor facility. And there's a rope along the sideline. We can't go past it. We're like just we're kept away from the big things, and they're all across they begin across the field in the Alabama indoor like gym. So that's like 200 yards away, and they're over there doing all the other things, jumping and weighing in, and you have no idea what's going on until they come over on the field. But that didn't really matter because Bryce Young didn't weigh in. So hey, I know people are probably getting sick of listening about his size and things like that, but it is notable, in my opinion, where he goes to the combine and he weighs in, but he doesn't work out, and then 3 weeks later he works out, but he doesn't weigh in, and he says he's at 204. He says he's around there. The point is that they aren't going to let people know what his playing weight is right now, and that leaves it up to people who can verbally support him. Nick Saban was saying it doesn't matter. I frankly don't think it matters as much as people say it does. I mean, we've seen prototype quarterbacks. I mean, the 49ers, I think we talked about this last time I was on this. All of their prototype quarterbacks get hurt. The Texans, in their history, Schaub got hurt, and then his backup, right, Matt Leinart, breaks his collarbone immediately after that. So they were all 6'5", 220 plus people. But yeah, I mean, went through his throws, saw him go through it. I mean, he would fit, I think, in the offense Bobby Slowick's trying to build. Came from the 49ers, a lot of West Coast tendencies. If y'all were watching him throw, they had that televised. He didn't hit his deep throws as much. I mean, he looks really – his timing is impeccable on his short throws. He looks great. His footwork's great on those. But it's noticeably different whenever he's heaving the ball 40 yards or plus. Some of the accuracy, I think, comes off of that. You look deep into the numbers. When he played at Alabama, anything beyond 20 yards, he wasn't as accurate as, say, Mac Jones was in 2020. It was a dip. They worked around it. I've just gone through the first 2 games of film study that I'm doing into Bryce Young.
Mac did have some pretty damn good receivers, though.
So did Bryce Young in 21. So it's been something with Bryce the last couple of years. I'm not saying like, oh, don't draft him now. I'm just saying what I saw.
Yeah.
You're looking at some tendencies that probably that scouts are thinking about too. It's yeah, I mean, he's going to come in, and I mean, the 49ers, they were running a lot of crossing routes, West Coast routes. Those are the things that Bryce Young's good at. I don't think it's going to throw the Texans off in any way or form, but those were kind of my initial takeaways from looking at Bryce.
What does Saban do during a pro day? Is he just kind of chilling? Like, he doesn't have anything to do with it, right? He's just hanging out. Like, because I know, like if it's a walkthrough or if it's anything else, Saban's like probably hands on. What does he do during a pro day? Just hang out.
Yeah, he wore his pink shirt, his collared shirt. He was wearing loafers with no socks. He was just walking around, shaking hands, smiling. He looked the happiest you've probably ever seen him outside of winning a football game. And I think I think with coaches, these are the moments that they like. I can always remember John Calipari after a season's over. And I remember he got a lot of flack that one year. I think it was about 10 years ago where he had the whole Kentucky basketball team basically declaring for the draft. I think they had 8 guys on the stage all at once. They enjoy that stuff. And they come out there and they get to see the guy have their day. Bryce Young. I haven't heard that many players that have gotten that much praise from Nick Saban like that over the last couple of years consistently. And it's just seeing him get his opportunity, and Nick Saban didn't have to do anything anymore. It's like, empty nesting, seeing them go off and do their thing. So he came over, he talked to us for I don't know, 5-6 minutes, and just answered the questions and stuck up for him through his size, and said some good things about Will Anderson, who's probably a top 5 guy too.
Who the Texans met with.
Yes, that's right. I usually roll my eyes at that question. Who have you met with? Because then everybody meets everybody. But I did perk up when he said the Texans and Texans alone. I mean, everybody did, at least from the Houston standpoint. And visited. He was the first one. It was March 8th or 9th earlier in the month. One of the first ones the Texans did too. Top 30 came in, met with Demiko Ryans, talked about the defense, turned on the film. He could be an outside linebacker in a scheme. He could be a stand-up defensive end. He could be a down-in-the-dirt defensive end. From what he was talking about with Demiko, he's saying like he's going to be hands-in-the-dirt guy if the Texans were to draft him. And that's somebody the Texans really need. I mean, we're looking at top to bottom with the Texans. Yes, they need a quarterback. Yes, they need to bulk up the offense. I don't think they do anything else with the number 2 overall pick other than draft a quarterback. But if they were to go defensive end for the outside shot of it, I mean, Will Anderson's a stud. I mean, right now you're looking at what, Jerry? Are you
talking
Hughes,
at 2, or are you talking there's a chance he falls and you trade up from 12? Because we've had this discussion. I actually did a video on it.
I think there is. Because you have the Cardinals at 3, right? They could take him. There's also does Jalen Carter somehow keep sliding up and down? I know he had kind of a bad pro day in terms of weighing in and how he looked, but more information comes out towards the draft. I mean, if he were somehow available for them to trade up, I don't know. They also need things on offense. I don't think he's going to be available past 6 or so.
7. I started thinking 7.
I don't think the Texans are going to trade picks to go up and get Will Anderson. I think if they were going to do the opposite, let's say throughout this, they look at Bryce Young, they look at CJ Stroud, they decide one or the other they don't like. Let's just, for the sake of it, let's say they don't like Bryce Young. I don't think that's the case, by the way. But let's just say that week before the draft, we only like CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud gets taken by the Panthers. They've decided Young is not in that sphere. I could see them taking Will Anderson and then trading up with 12 to get whatever quarterbacks left. That would probably be the scenario. But yeah, I don't see Will Anderson being available outside of the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, the path would be he falls to 7 and then you call the Raiders, because I could see maybe Tyree Wilson going ahead of maybe. I'm not saying I would bet on it. I'm just saying like crazier things have happened. Then someone looks at Tyree Wilson and says, we'll take him. Then you take Carter. Then you get to the Raiders, and the Raiders at 7, they have Crosby. They have Chandler Jones. They can get out of Jones's contract after next season. Maybe they want to add some edge. Maybe Nick calls his buddy Josh McDaniels. You trade like one of the draft picks from last year. That's just creating a path. Like I'm just talking about creating a path. The most realistic path is, and I don't know how realistic this is you decide we don't want a quarterback. Our quarterback gets taken, you take him at 2. Because outside of that, there's not really you're reaching and you're basically hoping for the unexpected.
Yeah, and I still think the Raiders are in quarterback territory. I mean, I know they just signed it. I know
They
they
met
just
with Bryce
signed.
too. They met with Bryce at
They
your
met
pro
with
day.
Bryce. They're doing their diligence, and like I think, because what is Jimmy Garoppolo? 32 now. He's got a 3-year contract. He's gonna be hitting into his mid-30s. I if you're in that range, I still think Anthony Richardson would make sense in that kind of environment where he doesn't have to start immediately. You can work him into the scheme. But I don't know. They
Well, the other thing is
could still decide.
if you're going to draft Will Anderson, do you agree with this? Like if you decide you don't want to take a quarterback, shouldn't you be looking to trade with someone like the Raiders or something like that at that point?
If you're the Texans and
Yes.
you got 7
Yes, like
there.
if you decide you don't want to take a quarterback, like everyone says, well, would they take, Will Anderson? If you get to that point, to me, like trading with someone at 7, the Raiders, or checking with Atlanta or something like that makes more sense than just taking Will Anderson, especially when you have Tyree Wilson, you have Jalen Carter. That would make more sense if we're getting to that point where we're saying, well, yeah, should they take Anderson at 2?
Yeah, I think what would happen is I don't obviously I wish I had it on the wall over here what their draft board looks like, but talking to James Lipford this year, last year, Caserio too, about how they build it, it's structured into tiers. And let's just say if Will Anderson was in their top 3, 4 tier, top 4 tier, and then he drops to 7, and they're sitting there and they say, okay, well, Jackson Smith-Njigba is high on our board. We've got other people that we have in that, let's just call it 5 to 12 sphere, and they're available or whatever. Is it worth in their data or in the way that they show it, to give up? What would it take? You think it would take a first rounder, or was second
To move from 12
rounder
to
go up from
7,
12 to 7? I think it would
move
take a
up from 12
first,
to 7
I
at
think.
the first, and maybe a third, and maybe who knows what else.
So that versus Jackson Smith-Njigba, let's say, is that better?
I don't know how much they love Will Anderson.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
that's
like if they look at it as this is the number. You mentioned the draft board. If they look at this as this is the number 1 guy on our board, but we want to take a quarterback. If all of a sudden you see that number 1 guy on the board fall to 7, then I don't know. I think they would look at it a little bit different.
I mean, they do need defensive line. I think, Demiko Ryans, he loves defensive ends. He loves getting that front line of scrimmage. If he really falls in love, it is notable that Anderson was one of the first they brought in, and that Will Anderson, had such a good conversation with them and came away thinking about it. So, that shows the interest from the Texans. Is that enough right now where they're saying, okay, I mean, this could all be moot. Like, does he get to 7 at all? I don't know.
Yeah,
So I don't think there's a situation where he's available at 7 anyway.
Yeah, it's just creating the path to the whole thing. That's the beauty of the mock drafts and all that. Where are you on Bryce and CJ? You said you were bringing up stats and stuff like that. I kind of feel like I can follow where your mind is sometimes when you're saying stuff like that. So where are you at there with Bryce and CJ?
So if the Texans were drafting number 1, which one do I see the best fit?
Like if you were having to say who is Brooks Kubena's top quarterback, who we got?
I think right now, I've been leaning a lot more towards CJ Stroud just throughout the draft process. I have, his accuracy is there, his throwing is there. I think within the Ohio State offense, I mean, obviously he had a lot of talent. You were just bringing that up about Mac Jones earlier, but I think that has played out over his career to the point where it's been consistent. His throwing sessions have been great. His size is there. I don't think that's a big issue. I've said already, but if the Texans are sitting in a situation where they need great accuracy, and that's what the West Coast demands. I'm not saying Bryce Young doesn't have it, but CJ Stroud gives you a wide range across the board. The Texans, I say that, but now I'm looking at the Texans situation, and like right now, they need, if you were going to supply CJ Stroud another receiver, the same thing with Bryce Young. But Bryce Young, you know that he's been able to go through a couple of transitions in offenses. Like 21, you were mentioning earlier, he did have a wide supply of talent. Last year, I think, was probably the toughest offense he had to operate within, which is saying something about how good Alabama is and still being number one overall to start the season, lasting throughout the year and having a significant
I
push.
thought you were talking about CJ. CJ was fine.
Yeah, CJ was fine. I was talking about Bryce Young,
Yeah.
but he has ability to improvise. I mean, I was just rewatching the Texas game earlier today. Probably one of the situations where early on he wasn't getting any of the looks he wanted downfield, but he was picking up yardage by running. He was picking up yardage by running outside the pocket. Those are the things that I like when I see Bryce Young, but I don't think CJ Stroud did a lot of that, and I don't think he was required to all that often until the Georgia game. And I need a little bit more sample size to like know that he can do that on a consistent basis. But adding all those things together, I think there's a lot of parity, and I still lean more towards Stroud in this sense. But
Man.
you know, I'm gonna be looking into this the next couple of weeks too. But
Wow.
I think CJ Stroud, if I were gonna pick one, he'd probably be one there.
Yeah, I'm Bryce, but I get what you're saying. The other thing about that Texas thing that the Texas game that I don't think it gets enough credit. Like no one mistakes Texas as like an elite defense, but
Yeah.
that was a game where it was a record-setting crowd. I think Will Anderson actually said that was the most intense crowd he played in front of, which is saying a lot, being in the SEC for 3 years and being in Alabama.
I was
But
there in I was there for that. I didn't go in because I didn't want to pay $200 to watch them, lose by 20, but it ended up being a good game.
But it was also a game where Gary Patterson had 9 months to prepare for you. And if anyone says it wasn't Gary Patterson helping out with that game plan, I think that's pretty like literally 9 months of just preparing for you. So I thought that was a little bit, tougher of a game than maybe it looked on paper.
He was getting a lot of pressure in his face, even towards the end. Like they were bringing a lot of blitzes early on in the game. Once they were backed up in their own end zone, there was that. I believe
Safety.
it was a safety.
Should have been a safety.
Yeah, he had to throw, and they almost called it just an intentional grounding, and it got away from that. But towards the end of the game, like he was still facing pressure and was able to deliver passes in moments when they needed it. And there was a crucial 4th down and 3, I believe it was, and he was able to hit a really nice pass over the middle, in between the linebackers and the deep safeties. Like CJ Stroud in the combine called himself a ball placement specialist. Bryce Young can do that too, consistently within 20 yards. I didn't really think about this until I saw it from the pro day, but in the NFL, though, that'll get you that'll help you win games to be able to place it wherever you want within 20. And the Texans, I think from the way they talk about their offense so far, they want to be able to get the ball out quick, get it to people in space. Alabama did that a lot. They ran a lot of 2 running back sets, get the ball to a guy within 5 yards. They did it to the sideline too, a lot of screens. I mean, Bill O'Brien's running the offense, so you're expecting that. But to take the top off of a defense, you're going to have to do that. And those plays set those up deep and long. And right now, like I have more confidence that Stroud can do that than Young can. And I mean, you're looking at the Texans right now. Robert Woods, we haven't seen John Mechie as a pro yet. Nico Collins, is there a Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz? That's the core group. I have confidence that they can get looks within 20 with those guys. I don't know if there's a player yet who can take the top off of the defense.
It's not. It's a very slow receiving core.
Maybe Mechie could he's a great route runner. He might be able to get some separation, but like if they don't have one, then maybe it doesn't really matter. But we saw Drew Brees go through this transition too in his career as well. I mean, if you get a guy wide open, can you hit him? Maybe it won't be the most accurate ball in the world, but we've seen that Bryce Young can at least get the ball out there. Is it going to be directly on target? I don't know. So he's definitely going to be working on that.
I haven't talked to you about free agency. What do you think of Nick Caserio's approach, the 2-year contract approach?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things with that. I mean, I thought this would be the year where we'd start to see longer, more expensive contracts, and I mean we have started to see more expensive contracts. So at the beginning of the free agent cycle, I thought, maybe he was being a little bit more conservative, but last week I was pretty surprised by how much they got close to their budget space with Devin Singletary signing, the Dalton Schultz signing, but those again are 1-year deals. So what I'm really kind of seeing this as is, people in the comment section, I'm interested in how y'all viewed some of the signings of the last couple of years. Basically, all they had the budget for was to bring in a lot of people who weren't going to make the team on other teams to come in, try and become a core player, and no one at NRG Stadium knows their names. And they were going to fight for a job and get through it and still have the flexibility as a franchise to move on from them rather cheaply. And now, after the salary cap has been expanded for the Texans, all the bad contracts except for the Brandon Cooks one has been wiped off the board. I think there's probably a little bit of back and forth with players. And I know I keep retreading because I think it's something in my mind again, but to stay on the consistent flow of it, like the Texans getting 1-year deals with, say, Dalton Schultz, with Devin Singletary, that gives the Texans flexibility to move on, but that also is showing that these other players are meeting the Texans in the middle in a spot where they're like, okay, I think that I still have value because I'm in my mid-20s, late 20s, and I don't know if I want a long-term contract over here. I want to prove it here and then try and make it somewhere else. The Texans right now, if I were a big-time free agent, I'd have to really believe in the team to sign up for 4 years. And that says something that Laremy Tunsil's been able to do it, but he got the biggest contract in NFL history for an offensive lineman. The Texans, I don't think, from Caserio and from talking to people and just being around the combine and other things and seeing these play out, talking to people about the free agency signings, I don't think that Caserio was going to get himself into situations where he was going to get himself into bidding wars over this free agency class. There were some top guys at different positions, defensive tackle especially, but just take the Jimmy Garoppolo contract, for example. Like, he was not starting towards the beginning of the year. Trey Lance would have been the starter all year if he was healthy. And the Raiders just shelled out a bunch of cash, and the Texans, with Bobby Slowick there, could have been a reasonable position to take him, but it just got to the point where he's making money to the point where that's not only starter money, that's good starter money. Apply that to some of the rest of the positions. I don't think the Texans were going to sit there and be like, okay, we're going to be like the Jags and spend $250 million on players that aren't really in the same profile that the Jags paid for last year. So I think they did the signings that they made, like, I don't know, you can take Dalton Schultz, and again, I just bring those up because those are big. Even Sheldon Rankins, right? 1 year, $10 million, gives them flexibility. But it didn't, put them in a position where down the road they're going to be sitting there like with the Whitney Merciless contract, having to cut him and deal with the cost. So it'll be interesting to see how much they where they go in the draft, whether that doubles up in the positions that they've already acquired through free agency. But while it's not the greatest free agency haul ever, they put themselves in a position where they at least be competitive and give the quarterback they draft number 2 overall to show that he can have success. And whenever they come back around next year and still have the cap space situation pretty much that they have right now, they can go and be more successful and then go to the table again with premier free agents and then agree to some long-term contracts, because those will be the type of caliber players that they'd want to make those kind of deals with.
Yeah, I think the only move that you could even compare to the Jags is the 1 year $9 million for Schultz, because I think that's about what Ingram got. That's really it. I also think Jacksonville's kind of in a different spot where even if we're talking about the caliber player, they had the quarterback and they kind of felt like, it was time to go. I've had no issue with the philosophy of the free agency. Like McLean came in all like pissing and moaning about it, and I just asked him, name a name. Like it was a very simple question, but John came in. This was before the Schultz thing. The Schultz thing, like he did like a 180, just but week one, he came in and it was basically, there's been unflattering, blah blah blah. I would have liked to have seen a splash, and I just said, well, give me a name, and he couldn't really give a name. It was like, well, I'd have liked to seen him and get this, and it's like, okay, well, they're not going to get a receiver. They're definitely not going to pay 40 million for, one player. So I don't see like a specific move is there like any specific move you can point to that was realistic that you say, well, maybe I would have liked to have seen him do this?
No, I mean, bemoaning, an alternative choice versus looking at, what the situation is and how they handled it. Like that's two different things. I'd say that's pretty much what my analysis was and what your argument is there too. I don't if they were going to go for higher free agencies, that means that it would have been in a bidding war for guys that made pretty much, if we're going to call them max deals. And I don't know if that's the position that they need to be in.
Yeah, I couldn't really name like a specific thing. Has anything that they've done tweaked what you think about the draft, or are we still in the BPA range? Is there anything that you're like, okay, heading into the draft, I thought they needed X, but now they don't need that? I almost think that gets eliminated because of the 2-year plan too. Like if the 2-year contracts, like if you think a guy's a really good player, I don't think they're in position where they're just trying to fill holes. They could draft, if a corner falls to them, let's say they really like a corner at 33. Let's say that there's no run on corners and you like where their corners are. Steven Nelson's on the final year of his deal. I don't think they're like going to ignore the corner or anything like that. I don't see anything. I could see any possibility with pretty much any pick outside of left tackle. I think that's the left tackle is probably the one thing that you can probably just wipe away with the first 3 picks.
I think running back is one of those for me. I know Singletary is only on a 1-year deal.
Don't you dare kill my dreams of as many running backs as possible. I want them all. Okay. I want them all.
Well, look, I think you're going to be in a situation. I think next year the Texans could still do a Singletary type signing. You could find another person where you could go that way. I mean, I'm just looking at the names right now. I mean, you could technically re-sign Devin Singletary, like depending on how other people come off the market. I think some of these names I'm looking at right now are probably just unsigned right now, but I don't know. Like, let's just say, I'm not even going to read off these names because I think like Ezekiel Elliott, he's going to get picked up. He may be on a 2-year deal, won't be available next year. But I think to the point, I think there's going to be players available where you can do a 1-year deal again, and they might not, have to go for a running back in this draft, and they could use that for other positions. I mean, this is a team that still needs more help on the offensive line. I think even though they just traded for Shaq Mason, like investing in the interior, whether it be at guard, center, whatever, I think using multiple picks there instead of picking up another running back would be a good decision for them because you're at least stable at the running back position for a year or two. Even if you pick up someone that's not quite Singletary level, Pierce would be going into his 3rd year as a pro, and you probably could work around with different types of running backs, or you could draft a rookie the year after if you really needed to. So I'd like to see them to go interior offensive line, definitely at center. I know they signed Michael Dieter, former 1st-round pick, but he hasn't really played that much.
Yeah, they need a center. There's no doubt they need a center.
They need a center, and they need it maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round. Like they need to go for it if that's the slot where it needs to be. And if that's where they start valuing players. I think even at guard, let's just say Shaq Mason is entering, his 30s, right? So that we've just seen the Texans go through offensive linemen that come in with injuries. Justin Britt, he came in, and even in his first year with the Texans was dealing with injuries like that.
He was coming off a torn ACL.
He was, and then so does Shaq Mason? Is he going to be okay into his mid-30s? That's kind of what happens, and you need to supply more. Kenyon Green, first-round pick, didn't play well as a rookie, partly because he was injured throughout training camp and never really bounced back from that. But to have somebody on the interior at guard, whether to be to replace Shaq Mason after a couple of years or to be there if Kenyon Green doesn't recover, I think that'd be a smart move. Also, if you're and even okay, so you're saying left tackle's fine. What are you going to do about Titus Howard? So if you're going to all right, Charlie Heck's been good. Are you going to keep him around? Would he eventually replace him? Probably not. The LC probably have done it already. If they had somebody in a spot where they could find a tackle that they like later on. Because I see this scenario. This is coming up a year from now. But I can see a scenario where, if they had the salary cap space to do it, you had Laramie Tunsil, do you franchise tag Howard to buy you another year until you have another tackle?
No.
I don't know. So you got to be prepared for whether you're going to
I think you let him play this year out, and if he's Jawan Taylor, where Jawan Taylor goes and gets a 4-year, $40 million deal, tip the cap and say thank you. I saw.
Then you're in need of a right tackle. So
I know, and I think they head into next year needing a right tackle. So I think you're right about potentially drafting a right tackle, whether it's a developmental guy in the third round, whether someone falls to you at 33 or whatever, and you're like, we got to have this guy. I think you do that because after the Tunsil contract was signed, there was, I think it was just basically just putting it out there for agents, but it was, well, who's next? Is Titus Howard going to get extended? And who's, I think Steven Nelson said something even like Titus Howard has had one good year. And I'm not saying that disrespectfully. I thought the fact that he got his 5th-year option picked up and he's playing for 8 figures this year is great. But when you start talking about the salary cap and you start talking about pieces of the puzzle, when you start talking about team building and you have the highest paid left tackle in the game, I think Titus Howard's a guy that goes and has a good year, and you make the tough decision to let him test out the market. And if he can go get a Jawan Taylor 4-year 40, congratulations. We got to get a right tackle.
I do think though, you got to acknowledge that Titus Howard was playing left guard for 21. He might have had 2 good years.
Oh, and that's why I would let him play it out. I'm not saying he's not good. If Titus Howard has another year like he did this year, then he's going to demand the 4 years 40. My point is, you're going to have to make these tough decisions, and I think this is one of those tough decisions that if he turns into someone that goes and demands it, you need to be able to be an organization that can develop a right tackle to fill in for Titus Howard. I don't think paying Titus Howard, what would the market be if he had another year like he did last year? Let's say he has a better year. Right. Now, the other hand of that is you're going to have a quarterback on his rookie deal. You're going to have all these rookie deals for players. So do you look at it as like a three-year window or whatever where you can overpay? Maybe, but I'm damn sure not giving him an extension now. There is no way that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay. So that's the offensive line. So the other thing that I was looking at too was if they were going to pick somewhere else, probably linebacker. I mean, they added 2 guys that former Pro Bowl players, but they've got some injury issues. Denzel Perryman, they finally brought it. I mean, they talked to Denzel Perryman they were looking into him for a couple of weeks, and they looked at his shoulder. They looked at everything. He's got 1 year, $3.5 million contract. You bring him in right now. You still have Christian Kirksey on the team. He's still, he's got, I think, 1 more year left on his deal, and he could be a cap casualty if Perryman or someone else starts stepping up. But they need to address that position, because I think in free agency it didn't really quite get there the way that they wanted. And I don't think inside linebacker is all that bad in the draft right now. I mean, just watching Alabama, Henry Tutu is, he's pretty good. And I'd say, within like, I'd say he'd probably be a top 75. I'm just thinking of it last year because they traded up to 75 to get Christian Harris. And he could possibly be there around in the third round if they were going to try and use some of their picks to go up and get somebody like that. And it would be worth it in some ways to get another guy who can work inside the tackles. I think Christian Harris's speed, we haven't really seen that range as much because, obviously his injury for the beginning of the year, but the kind of mold of the guys that they're bringing in kind of fit, tacklers in between the tackles that aren't exactly, you can line them up against the slot and running backs. And I think that could be a position to look at too.
You got someone acting like Caserio in the chat. I'm gonna have to put him in timeout. That's just so.
What's that?
Someone acting like Caserio in the chat. It's a little blah, little blah. So I put Nick in timeout. He's blocked for 5 minutes. Yeah, blocked for 5 minutes. Nick's blocked. There we go. Where else are we looking?
What if you just block Nick Caserio? That would be funny.
That would be hilarious.
You think he listens? You think he logs in on this? I did run into him in the hallway here at the Biltmore. Him and Demiko. So I'm at the NFL League meetings here in Arizona right now. So
yeah, he's been aware of some things that I've said, but no,
he has brought them up. He brought up how you were talking about his lexicon with the business stuff. So
when he brought that up there?
No, remember I think it was at Lovie Smith's introductory press conference.
Oh yeah, when he was talking about Silicon Valley, yeah.
Right, that's it. That's right.
Yeah.
Then the alarm went off.
He's done that for sure. What do you think of the receiver position in regards to? I want to look at like guys that are coming into contract years. We've talked about Titus. I think you let Titus play it out and then figure out what goes on with that. What about Jonathan Grenard? And it's not a contract year, but it's kind of an important year for Nico Collins now. And is there any hope for Brevin Jordan?
Oh, let's start with the last one, because Brevin Jordan last year to be losing snaps in that group,
healthy scratch multiple times,
was not good. I mean, that they went and got Dalton Schultz speaks a lot to that. I mean, he was going to be in a spot where he was going to be the pass catcher. And when I talked to people about Dalton Schultz after the Texans signed him, was partly like, he's a great pass catcher, but the thing is, like, can he run block? Can he do these other things? Like, that's what people were saying about Brevin Jordan all this time, but he was supposed to be the matchup maker, but he didn't have the 6'5" size and all of that. But look, he was a 5th round pick. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, move on. He's in a situation where I think this tight end position group, one of them's going to go, but I think they could probably be in a scenario where they're choosing between those. So yeah, this is definitely a year where you might see an early exit from him. Then to Grenard, yeah, I mean, this is make or break for him. I mean, to be healthy for one, to be productive too. This is his 3rd, 4th defensive coordinator, different scheme. I mean, it's still 4 down defensive end, hand in the dirt. So he's got some mobility there. And personally, I kind of want it to happen because Grenard's a great interview, and he's a good personality. And we could see stretches in 21 at least, whenever he was getting a lot of sacks, getting into the backfield.
Health, man. A lot of it's just as simple as health. That's the problem. You're having the same conversations about he and Nico this year. Really, it's health. Sometimes it's just you can't control that. Well, Grenard he wasn't playing great at the beginning last year, but I mean, I think he's a productive player. It's just, he said it last year. You talked to him, we talked to him straight off the field. It's health.
Yeah.
putting together a whole season.
And Obo Okoronkwo dealt with that too whenever he was playing with the Rams. He just couldn't stay on the field, partly why he got buried in the depth chart and partly why they kept adding there. And then he gets a situation where he finally stays healthy throughout a whole year. And he was the reason, well, with Grenard getting hurt, that was part of the reason why Obo Okoronkwo got a lot of playing time. And then he just kind of kept it towards the end of the year and, turned in a great year and got a big contract and moved elsewhere. That could be the scenario where Grenard is facing if he doesn't have a healthy year. And that would also be problematic for the Texans because obviously they need edge rushers. That was somebody that they identified, like Lovie Smith. I remember last year, y'all remember during the training camp too, he was just saying like he expected a big year from Grenard. Like he kept saying that. Like he identified them as a player that he really liked, really was expecting to have a big year. And that didn't happen. And partly, because of the injuries. So if the Texans, I'm not in any way saying that they're the same player, but it's the same kind of situation because they're both third-round picks. But so Davis Mills, right? If he had worked out, you have what could be a really expensive player on a third-round contract. And if he plays well enough, then you can address other things. So let's look at it from this angle. So Grenard is a third-round pick this year. I still think is hovering around $1 million in his cap hit. I'd have to really check again, but I don't think it's anything far off of that. If he has a productive year, if it's not, let's just say it's not a Pro Bowl year, but let's say he gets like 9 sacks, is healthy the whole time, gets in the backfield consistently, his pressure rate's higher. He's not going to sign a huge contract elsewhere, but the Texans could be in a spot where they could resign him to play in that scheme again under, say, a 2-3 year deal. That's better for him, but it gives him more money, and you don't have to go chasing higher free agent defensive ends. That's the kind of year that I could see being a realistic thing that happens from Grenard. Pie in the sky, he takes off and he has a great year, but then you have the risk of losing him like you did with Rockwell.
Yeah.
So
which is fine. Happens.
Yeah.
Happens.
It happens. And then they'd have to be drafting a defensive end again. So
you got to be developing players. You got to be finding players like that every year. Sure. Brown Chubby Bear, do you think anyone in the 2021 draft class remains a starter? I don't think there's any chance that Roy Lopez does. God bless him. They got pushed around too much inside. So I don't think he's more of a rotation guy anyways.
Wait, that's not a draft. 2021 draft
class. So he's talking Mills, Nico, Brevin, which Brevin wasn't starting anyways. Does Nico start?
Nico starts right now. Yeah.
Does he?
I think so. No one else has his size profile. That's going to be he's also, I think he doesn't get as much credit for blocking as he does. Who talks about that really about wide receivers? But he's got the build. He's got a matchup.
That's off on that long run last year.
Yeah. So I think he could start. I think he'd probably be a starter. But and the thing with Nico too is last year that was another player people thought would take off, and then dealt with the injuries again. So if he stays healthy, I could see that happening. But Davis Mills.
No, just say no.
I'm just I'm pausing because I'm trying to wonder if let's say the Texans, as they will draft a quarterback number 2 overall. They have Keenum as a backup. Does Mills stick around? I could see a situation where he may not be with the Texans this year, if that were the case. Go pursue another opportunity elsewhere, because I think I still say this, and people go look back at my story, whatever. I wrote more about his last year with Stanford, how COVID really screwed all that up. But if he had stayed and come back the next year in a down year where people were wondering if a quarterback was even
he would have been a first-round pick.
He would have been a top 5 pick.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
I hear this all the time. Come on, Brooks.
Yeah, so
we got to quit saying that. There's an expiration date on that. We're done with that.
Yeah, but the offense that the Texans have been playing with, not optimal. I think he could pursue somewhere else. I don't know if he – and here's another statistic. Every Texans quarterback who began the season as starter and then was later benched, did not play for the Texans the year after that. So there's some basis to think Mills will go elsewhere.
That's some data right there.
Not there. Nico will start, I think, at this point. Brevin Jordan, no. Garrett Wallow, no. Roy Lopez, no.
Boy, they loved Wallow. Tyler, and I like Wallow too. Tyler as a dude and a special team contributor sometimes.
Not anything more than that.
Tyler asks, if we go defense at 2, then Hendon Hooker needs to be prioritized and he can sit behind Case. My God. I don't like Hendon Hooker, man. And I'll explain. The age is one thing. Like, people can argue about age. We can argue blah, 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 age, 25, all that. People like to say, well, they quarterbacks play till they're 37. Yeah, but there's also a certain level of like development and maturity that from 21 to 25 that I think is valuable, and it's more valuable in like an NFL atmosphere. Neither here nor there. We can then go into the ACL, and ACLs, they're not what they once were. So I'm not going to say like those are two things, but I don't think they're like deal breakers. I don't think we're fully aware of how much of a system Josh Heupel potentially runs at Tennessee to where it's very quarterback friendly. And if you look at how the backup did when he came in for Hooker this year, and I've heard guys talk about, just kind of what they would do and how they're like, they would just put Hyatt in the slot. They'd put guys like a foot away from out of bounds, and then he would just go back and throw it to Hyatt. It was a nice ball and everything, but you look at what the backup did: 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think it was. He came in and did his thing. They skull drug Clemson. I think they beat Wake Forest by like 50 when Hooker went down. I don't think we fully are respecting just how much of a system that Josh Heupel has at Tennessee, because I don't think we have like a large enough sample size.
Yeah, if the Texans end up drafting Josh Heupel,
I mean Hendon Hooker. If they draft Josh Heupel,
I'm sorry. Hendon Hooker. Heupel was on the mind. Hendon Hooker. There's no way.
By the way, Josh Heupel has frustrated me at Texas OU games more than anyone else. God, that sucked. But
yeah, he's not going to be a Texan. If the Texans don't draft a quarterback number 2 overall, I think there will be hell to pay. And they know that they have to be competitive this year, meaning Nick Caserio, meaning everything. So, like, I could see a situation where, how we were just talking about how Davis Mills was drafted in the 3rd round. Think of a team. All right, let's say the Raiders, if they don't draft a quarterback like Anthony Richardson at 7 or whatever, they decide to go with another pick. They go Tyree Wilson or whatever. I could see them going with that caliber of a quarterback later in the 2nd, 3rd round. That would be the destination for Hooker. The Texans simply just they're not at that. They have the chance to go get the top quarterback. They could still trade up to get one if they, that's something that they wanted to do and felt the conviction to do so. So no, I don't. Hendon Hooker is not on that radar. I don't think.
Not. He seems like a great dude. I'm rooting for him. It just just not as big on him. Space Age 713. I can't believe QJ. I'm assuming he's talking about Quentin Johnston is not being talked about enough. Deep threat and can moss DBs with a 40-inch vert. I actually think his catch radius when contested is not as good as, I don't have the number in front of me. I think Jonathan Crumpler put it out, but it's not as good as you might think it should be with Quentin Johnston. What do you think about Quentin Johnston? I'm going to say at 12. I think he's fallen. I could see him somehow being there at 33 because I think Zay Flowers is getting a lot of momentum. I think Smith-Njigba is getting a lot of momentum. I don't know I don't know if he's going to fall that much, but I don't love him as much as some people do. I know Seth Payne's a big fan.
Well, I don't think Quentin Johnston, he didn't run the 40 at the combine, did he? I don't think he did.
No.
So like that's my question. Like we were just talking about how the Texans don't have somebody that can take the top off of a defense. Like I'm not saying that Nico Collins is Quentin Johnston or vice versa or whatever. I'm just talking about the size, what they have in a receiver, what profile they need, and what they're looking for. I mean, the Texans need somebody with speed who can go downfield and open up things for the rest, take away attention. Robert Woods can't do that as much anymore, I don't think. We'll see. I think the Titans situation was obviously not optimal for his offense, but maybe he can still demand that kind of attention. But it would help him a lot and everyone else if there's somebody who could really do that. Quentin Johnson as a force.
I'm looking at Zerline. I'm looking at the Zerline scouting report right now, and his elevation and catch radius is not as good against uncontested catches than someone his size should have. He says his weaknesses: long release steps allow him to be tagged, struggles to create leverage. So like this notion that he's like huge and you can just lob it up and he's going to go up and get it. It doesn't, at least according to Zerline. Zerline's watching 100 times more tape than I ever will. And I watched him at TCU, Texas decommit, by the way. But yeah, I'm not big on Johnston, man. I like these smaller, faster receivers better.
I'm seeing Cam in the comments here saying he's a speed guy. Look, everybody as a wide receiver in the NFL runs a 4.5, 4.4. Like you're looking for receivers that get down into the 4.3s. Brandon Cooks, he's a 4.3 kind of guy. Like on a good day, comes in, runs a 4.39. He still says he can do that. That's the kind of player I'm talking about. I'm not saying he's slow. I'm just saying he's not going to outrun cornerbacks and safeties in the NFL. That's what they need.
If you're not going up, if you're that size and you're not going up and getting it against Big 12 guys, then it's not going to get much easier against NFL guys. I mean, that should be like a strength of his. Texans underground Landry, do you think Nick would call OB? No, I don't think OBJ is coming to the Texans. I don't.
That's a good one. I like that.
I don't. Busy 2 presents. I like Teagan and Dalton as the number 1 and 2. What do you think? I think that's right at tight end.
Yeah, that's right. You got a guy who is a proven pass catcher, and you have someone who has the build to be a blocker and did it last year pretty successfully. And he wasn't a bad receiver towards the end of the year too, especially in the final game. Didn't really have much exposure to it. I think he's definitely a target that could open up things in the red zone. That's where he got his touchdowns. So that would be my 1-2. And they would do that a lot. The 49ers did that a lot.
Lover OGET asking, are you on the trade for Judy train? I am not. And there's a lot of questions on that. I'm just not.
The Texans are not in position to just start trading for players that are question marks. Like they have opportunities to draft players that they've been scouting for a year and don't have to give up extra assets for. Like I think that's more where they're in right now. And you can get a guy and not have to worry about re-signing them under a new contract and other things like that. At the market rate, just where this team is, I just don't see them making moves like that.
The JSN train, where you at there? Smith-Njigba.
Oh, I'm on the train. That's the player that I've been talking about with someone who can take the top off of a defense. He's did that, and I've listened to your show too. You've talked about how you brought people on from Ohio State angles, be that as it may, but even their own players have been saying, he's the best out of that group.
The thing that I hate the most about the JSN thing is like, I think there's a difference between not being able to do something and not being asked to do something. And I think there's an even bigger difference between not being asked to do something because you can't and because they don't need you to. Like Jackson Smith-Njigba last year, when he was lining up in the slot, he's elite in the slot. Like he's the best slot guy in this draft. Last year, we were having arguments about who the best slot guy was, and you would get like 3 different answers. If you ask who's the best in the slot, I think most people would say JSN. Now, Zay Flowers is getting a lot of momentum. Zay Flowers is getting a lot of love. But as far as just being a slot assassin, JSN is that guy.
Yeah.
Why in the hell, if you had an elite guy in the slot, would you ask him to line up outside when he has Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson on his team? Like people say, well, he wasn't in the slot. Well, no kidding. Like you see those first round picks that they had lining up on the outside. Why would they ask him to do that?
Another classic example, pull it out to a different team that had stacked receivers. Go back to 2019 LSU. Guess who was playing slot? Justin Jefferson. Does that mean he can't play on the outside? He can, and he has, and he's done it just fine. I mean, whenever you have Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall on the outside, somebody's got to play on the inside.
And that's what people were saying about Jefferson, and that's why he slid to fifth. Like people were saying, well, he's only in the slot. He's only in the slot. And then he doesn't have Chase and he doesn't have all those other guys. He goes in and you realize, oh, this guy can do everything.
Yes, he can. And I think Jackson Smith-Njigba can do that as well.
Yeah, I'm a big Jackson Smith-Njigba guy. Who do you think Carolina takes? You think Carolina's fronting? What do you make of this Carolina thing where they're taking it far enough to even go out to eat with Will Levis?
I mean, they went out to eat with Bryce Young too. They went out to eat with C.J. Stroud.
Will Levis, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Now we're just getting. Now we're just
the talk that I had heard at the combine was that they were thinking about him whenever they were at 9. Well, now they get to, dine at the front of the table, at the front of the restaurant, and get whatever they want. So right now, I think that's C.J. Stroud, and it fits a lot of what they've got. I mean, think of all the people that are going into these, full court presses at the pro days. You've got, Frank Reich, former prototype quarterback who has worked with prototype quarterbacks, Andrew Luck, etc. Carson Wentz. You have, another. You have Josh McCown, who was a prototype quarterback, size-wise, and had a long career in that way. You have Caldwell, who is the senior advisor, but worked with Peyton Manning and everyone else. The one thing that I did notice in that research, though, Scott Fitterer being their GM, he was the one that was part of the college scouting whenever they drafted Russell Wilson, but that was in the 3rd round. That wasn't number 1 overall. So if they're thinking about size and how that relates to how they view the quarterback position, I think that still goes around Stroud. So that would be who I think the Panthers take number 1, which leaves people like you and everyone else happy that the Texans land with their guy, Bryce Young.
It makes me very happy. It should make you happy too. Bryce is a star, and he's polarizing because there are people who are – it feels like there's more Bryce haters than there are. I feel like Bryce gets the most love, but I feel like there's a little more passion for the distaste of Bryce Young than there is C.J. Stroud.
Maybe I don't know. I maybe I'm insulated from that because I always heard I still hear a lot about how C.J. Stroud just didn't have enough showing that he can handle pressure and that he like his footwork, his ability under pressure was not as smooth. He was not as good as improvising as Bryce Young. We saw that. The Georgia game was his one shining moment to talk about March Madness. R.I.P. Horns.
Oh my God.
But he still needs to show more that he can handle pressure. I think that's still one of the things that the Texans would desperately need to consider if they were going to have the opportunity to draft him. But I mean, at the same time, all these things, when you're given a choice between one quarterback and another quarterback, you're going to bring up a lot of, it's going to seem like they both suck by the time you start talking about them, but they're really good, both of them. And I kind of like, we were talking to James Lipford on a conference call the other week, and obviously he's not going to tell us who he likes, but the way he talks, and he's going to tell us who he likes. They're not who they're going to draft. That's what I mean. But like he'll say who he likes, and talk about them as really as a 1A and a 1B, and I think that's true. So like if the Texans at 2 have one or the other available, I think they're going to be just as happy with whatever they are able to draft.
See what happens. It'll be fun. By the way, you should all subscribe to the Chronicle. All of y'all should subscribe to the Chronicle. Where they got to go to subscribe to the Chronicle. And by the way, this is the guy who broke the Demiko Ryans story. I've been bragging about that for a while. You broke the Demiko Ryans story. How about that? Look at that.
How about it? We talked about this on the show last time, didn't we?
Look at that. The Demiko Ryans newsbreaker right there. Look at that. The beast.
Yeah.
How do you think it's going to be working with Demiko, by the way?
It's going to be great. Got a chance to talk with him personally a couple of times after the hire. He's got such charisma, energy. All the things that I heard from people before the Texans made their decision was that he's going to go in and be able to connect to players and energize them, and also, I mean, his defensive schematically is like it's up there, it's advanced. He's the right guy for the position. And like,
why did Lovey hate you?
What?
Why did Lovey hate you so much?
Lovey hate me?
Come on.
He didn't hate me.
Come on.
He didn't hate me.
Come on.
Look, professionally, we understood each other.
Come on.
We understood each other.
He hated you. Come on.
And the Miami game was, I was just talking to somebody about that earlier today because we were just going over the past season. And the Texans, I think, were they 1-7 at that time? I don't remember, but they were that was whenever we had our back and forth. Whenever he stopped me from having the question and then was going the rest of the way. But that was a time whenever I had to ask him about whether he thought he was going to be the head coach next year, and Cal McNair, the owner, is in the back of the room, and the reaction was what the reaction was. And I don't think he definitely didn't hate me.
No, but, I think he took out his frustration on you, man. I mean, maybe not like you didn't earn the hate. I've earned hate. Like I've earned like Bob getting mad at me in a press conference. Like, you call someone a football idiot enough, he's gonna. I mean, I understand that, but like, Lovey took out his frustration on you. I'll put it that way. Although he did spread the love a little bit. There was a time where he was just kind of spreading it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. We're fine. The rest of the season. I think behind the scenes, things aren't always as bad as it looks whenever you see things happen on a press conference.
I just like the entertainment. I like the press conferences to be entertaining. I'm a podium critic, man. I enjoy that.
Maybe I should like play it up, like as long as I'm good with the person behind the scenes, we'll be like talking to each other. What was that movie, Man on the Moon, whenever like he had the beef with the wrestler and no one knew the joke between them?
Oh, the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just
I watched,
hey, look, I'll tell Demiko Ryans the next time. Hey, look, let's just hate each other. Like, I ask you a question, you dig into me, and then no one else will know except for the people that were on the YouTube stream.
Who else did Lovey go off on? He went off on DJ. He went off on Jonathan. He went off on you.
That day?
No, like and over the course of the season, he went off on Jonathan. He went off on DJ. He always had his snarky comments though that were just like it was very hard for Lovey to follow a consistent line of thinking. Appreciate you, Marcus.
Hey, is that my beer money? Is that for me?
Yeah, you can have it next time.
Yeah.
Meal on you. We can go middle. That's for you. So we'll go casual dining. I owe you a casual dining meal. Casual dining is like we can push it to Chili's / Buffalo Grill / like Pluckers can be casual dining too. So you can go in that range. But once you start mentioning steak, we're not quite going Sawgrass yet.
What's the Asian restaurant that John likes so much? John McClain.
Oh man,
are we in that range? Do we have to invite the ambassador?
Is the ambassador casual dining, or is that a notch above casual dining? I'm asking my wife.
Will get you there in some of that.
What is it? She says it's a step above. Wifey says it's a step above.
All right. But like, if we went to the ambassador, you and me, and then took a picture and sent it to John, would he get mad that we didn't invite him?
Probably. But John's been losing weight. He can't be eating that crap anymore.
You can sit down and I don't know. Can you bring the soda plan with you into a restaurant? I mean, you can eat clean
at Ambassador. He just can't. He eats like 2 egg rolls. They're like the size of Barry Bonds baseball bats. Like he eats like a pig there. It's almost embarrassing. But Lovey went off. I don't see Demiko getting mad. Do you?
No. I think
he understands the game. Like you,
I think that obviously he's younger, right? So Lovie Smith, coming into his 3rd time as a head coach, comes into a situation where he honestly, throughout that year, Lovie Smith, from me even, was having to answer questions that really weren't the ones that he needed to answer. There weren't his questions to answer. It's like your team is what your team is, and you're out there trying to win, and you're trying to say things are competitive, but I mean, what do you got to a certain point? I'm not saying like there weren't things that he could have done better schematically or whatever, but like once you keep getting hit Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday with all these questions, and you feel like you've been a proven coach and you've gone to a Super Bowl, and you got fired at 10-6 with the Bears, and now you're getting your third shot with a team that just fired another one and done coach, and now you're sitting there kind of seeing the writing on the wall. That's not going to be Demiko Ryans. Demiko Ryans is coming in as the up-and-coming defensive coordinator that everybody wanted.
Lovey thought at some point he was playing with house money. Like, shouldn't Lovey at some point have felt like he was playing with house money? The other thing is this, like with
I don't think anybody at that position in their career, or like anybody that becomes a head coach, will ever have the mindset I'm playing with house.
What do you mean? Like, he knew no one was going to hire him as their DC. No one was going to hire him as a head coach. Like, maybe you get that perspective.
Yeah, I know, but like from our perspective, you can say that. But from the person who has the opportunity to be the head coach, that's going to be like, okay, now I need to win. Now I need to do my job, and I need to keep this. I don't think there's ever anything in their mind that's like, you know what, I'm just going to act like I don't care about this.
No, not care, but damn, man. Like the other thing is this. There's another thing about this. Yeah. It's not fun watching you coach. Like it's not fun covering your squad and watching you coach either. So it's like
there's a lot of understand for that for sure. Why the Texans have been bad the last couple of years. So I mean, Demiko Ryans is coming in at the come up. He's the come up coach. They've got the come up roster, and they're going to have the quarterback and everything else. So he should be happy. We're going to talk to him tomorrow morning.
Okay, yeah, at the owners' meetings. The other thing about Demiko that I kind of really like grew an admiration for him from like a podium perspective was the week of the playoff game when him and Kafka were both asked the same question, and it was, obviously about the coaching rumors, and Kafka went out there and was like, I'm not going to answer any questions about this, okay? I want y'all to respect it. You know what the first question is, buddy. Yeah, like he got the question, and he didn't get ticked. He was fine, but he was just like, look, I'm not going to do that, okay? Demiko, no lie, 11 minutes of like very, very detailed analytical stuff about being a head coach during a playoff week. And I was like, all right, this guy gets it. This guy gets it.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you're also elevating yourself in the public image, giving everybody a reason to come and get you. And I mean, I think he also knew a little bit through the landscape of like, okay, what jobs are going to be available. He knew that he could have been up for some last year. And I still go back to it. And I've talked to him about this since, and others too. It's like whenever Nick Caserio called it, he was the one who talked about it first. Whenever there was the introductory press conference, he's like, Demiko told him that it was his dream job and he wanted to come there. So like, he kind of could see where things were going, like, and to give people kind of perspective and insight into what his thought process is one thing for sure. So Kafka, I think he's in the situation. It was kind of different for him. I think whenever you sit there,
I think he'll do it next year too, though. That's that Dable part of it.
It's like he was was that his first year as offensive coordinator of the Giants? I think one time.
Yep.
So like same situation. Like last year, and he probably doesn't want to answer questions and be presented and all that because he kind of maybe even knows like it's not his time yet. So that might be part of it too.
Speaking of time, man, it's only 8:00 up there, right?
8:14.
There you go. Well, what time you got to get up and get at him? You're at the owners' meetings.
Probably about 3:30.
Okay, I'll let you go to bed then.
Go climb Camelback Mountain and run back to my hotel, and then see if JJ Watt's around, and try and get him some brunch. I don't know. Is he still living out here?
I don't know. I feel like those were bad jokes that you just told. And I feel like people really think you're climbing a mountain. That was poor execution by you, sir.
What, do I look like a mountain climber?
Kinda. Kinda.
I look like Matt Burke with the beard going out to whatever pinnacle there is.
Kinda. You kinda do. You kinda look like you could be a guy that would wake up at 2 a.m. and climb a mountain. You do. I don't want to
So
stereotype.
whenever,
I can easily see that.
so I did. Let's see. On Fridays, I get on with Sean and Seth at 7:20, and one time Nick Caserio he kicked me off my time slot at 7:20, and I had to go at 6:20. And the next time I saw Nick, I was like, "Hey, so what's the deal, man? Like, you're knocking me off my slot." And he's like, "Welcome to my world. You have to wake up at that time." I was like, "Give me any." And I was like listing through all like the caffeinated things that he just gets up and does it. So
Yeah,
I'm just glad I don't have to do it.
he's a freak. Like, he's a freak show. Like, I like giving Nick a hard time, but it's I don't even want to know his routine, honestly. It's probably like get up at 5, do like stair stepper, coffee, go up to the facility. Who knows? Like, I don't even want to know. It's
Look, part of these things too, like you at the NFL Combine, NFL, league meetings. Like as reporters, you go out, you go to the bars, you hang out, you see who's around. The next time I see Nick Caserio out around, those things will be the first time. So
I ain't doing
like
that. I ain't doing that.
You ain't doing that.
What's Lippert like, man? What's Scout Goodhair like?
I've only got to talk to him a couple of times.
Is he just Scouty? Is he like just one of those
he comes over, shakes your hand, big smile, you talk, and he's an instant connector. Like I can see how, like, to go on the road and have thousands and thousands of mileage on your on your cars and your airlines and all that. That takes like a level of energy, and like if I did that, I would be depressed and out of it in like 3 months. Like to just be away from everybody, doing all of that. I can see how he's able to do that. How he has like, he has.
And keep that hair, bro.
The hair helps out.
He's got that. He's just got that flow, man.
I talked to one of his friends. I forget. This story was a long time ago, but he was saying like on the road. I don't know why this is surprising anybody. It shouldn't be, but like Lippert will call them up and they will be like on the phone for like 4 hours, and that builds up conversation. Like somebody, like your conversation, let's you speak for 4 hours in a day, like consistently. So like, whenever I met him, it's just like, he's asking all like, where are you from? All the things that I would ask. Right. So like most times you go up to a person, coach, executive, whatever, you're the one that has to keep asking questions. So like, I don't know, like I met him a couple of times, and I would say that, that they've been good interactions, but I don't know them all that well.
I'm just always curious what those dudes are like. I enjoyed his press stuff probably more than a lot of listeners did. I would say they probably were bored by it just because some of that stuff will bore people, but
yeah, he's the thing is about those kind of availabilities is all the things that you want him to say, he can't. It's like,
yeah, and it's not his place. Like, if Nick wants to give us some information, he can, but you can't be the guy. Like, you can't be the scout that says it.
And then get fired, and then
it's like the coach, like Frank Ross can't come out and say, I mean, Frank's always entertaining, but he can't come out and, talk about identity, like.
Because like you get there, and I don't know, we were just talking about Lovie Smith too, and Lovie Smith was good about that too. Whenever somebody would ask a direct question that he couldn't answer, he's like, "Come on," he'd be like, "Come on, I can't answer that." And you're like, "I know you can't answer that, but I got to ask you that." Like, all right, well, what are we doing?
Competitive advantage.
Yeah, that would
be. All right, well, go get ready to climb your mountain or whatever you do, man. I'll holler at you. I appreciate you for joining me at the owners meetings. Keep traveling. Before you know it, the draft will be here. Are you going to the actual draft? You're just gonna be at NRG, I assume, right?
No, yeah, I did the draft once when I was covering LSU.
It's pointless. You're not talking to anyone anything. The place to be is NRG. I'm gonna be at the party, and then I'll be streaming after the Texans pick, so doing like a live stream. You've got to be at the draft. You've got to talk to Nick and all them. Plus, it's comfortable.
Right.
Most comfortable sport.
Right. I see Devin White got picked number 5, and it took 2 hours for me to talk to him. Like I had to go into the hallway, and they're going like, commercial to commercial.
Literally nine straight interviews. ESPN Radio, ESPN Live, CBS.
And by the time they get to you, they're pissed and don't want to talk to anybody anymore. Yeah,
and they've been asked all the questions, so they're just kind of annoyed. It sucks.
They're like, what do you want to know?
Don't go to the draft. Don't go to the draft if you actually have to work. Now, if you don't have to work, go to the draft.
And then I'd miss the Zoom calls with Damian Pierce where he's shirtless and excited. Like that I would miss that. That would be the whole thing.
Thursday. All right, man. Appreciate you as always, my friend.
Yeah, you too.
The legend, man. Brooks Kubena right there. Gracing us with his presence. The man who broke the Demiko Ryans story. One of the best beat writers in the game. Subscribe to the Chronicle. Come on, it's cheap. Go to HoustonChronicle.com. Get it. Just him and Jonathan Alexander's coverage alone is worth it. And then you sprinkle in some Chandler Rome Astros coverage. Seriously, just do it. Like support the local stuff. They're breaking news. They're busting their ass. Stuff is fun. So go out there and support the Chronicle. It's better than all this other junk that you're probably spending money on. Best money that you'll spend. Some life on the beat. Go ahead and do that. Also, subscribe to this, comment, etc. We'll keep this going. I got a couple of ideas lined up for you this week. We're going to localize the views of the division. We're going to talk about the splash picks. What are the biggest splashes that could be made? And tomorrow at 10, we're going to be on. We're going to talk about all types of stuff. The draft month, Astros. I'm sure Lopez will act like he did something with UConn. I'm already seeing this coming. J-Lo, you ain't fooling me, sir. I'll see you at that. He's going to say, I told you all about UConn. That's coming. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Fire up the Odyssey app. Check you out. No matter what happens with the Texans stuff, just remember, though, we're all in this together. Have a good one.